Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the next session in our pre-Tikkun Leil Shavuot program. I'd like to welcome Joannie Tansky, who got in by the skin of her teeth. Somehow she wasn't able to connect, but she phoned and we connected, and thank God we see her in front of us. Just a couple of directions. Number one, this is being recorded, and secondly, please be sure to keep yourself muted so that there are no disruptions to Joannie's talk. So Joannie her talk is entitled "Are the Rules and Laws of the Torah Liberating?" Indeed they are. And now I'd like to give the screen over to Joannie.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me speak here. It's a little bit interesting to be, I've been on Zoom the whole time, like the whole time we've been locked down, but this is only the second time that I've been a speaker, so it's an interesting concept. It's also interesting that you can just wear something on the top and no one knows what you're wearing on the bottom, but whatever, it's a whole other kettle of fish. So my name is Joannie Tansky, and I grew up in Montreal, basically we're near the Spanish and Portuguese in the Snowden area. I grew up in a very traditional home at the time, and I'm 68 years old. So I grew up in the 50s and 60s when being Jewish it was just, that's who you were. There wasn't any, there wasn't any formality about it. I knew who I was, even though I didn't come from a religious home. I went to public schools. At the time, our high schools, my public school and high school, believe it or not, closed on the Jewish holidays because basically almost everybody was Jewish. So I had an identity. I knew I was Jewish. I knew I was going to marry somebody Jewish. It wasn't, wasn't rocket science. My family kept the holidays, kind of, with food, like all the other traditional Jewish families. Rosh Hashanah we had meals. Passover revolved, believe it or not, around hockey, because at that time in April, it was always the playoffs. And in those years, the Canadians were the hottest team in the National League. And so the Seder, I basically didn't know there was a second part to the Seder. Let's put it that way. I knew we did the first part, but second part somehow got usurped by by hockey. I very unusually at the time got married at 19 years old in 1971. I say it was unusual because in the early, like the late 60s and 70s, it was like the beginning of the, not feminist movement, but the whole hippie movement, and women were finding they're becoming liberated, and starting, like many women started going to university, where in the 60s they kind of didn't. But I got married. That's, looking back, I guess that's what God wanted from me, clearly. So I got married at 19, and my husband and I have 3 children. Now they're clearly adults and married. And when we started our home, I kept kind of kosher. It was my late mother-in-law's version of kosher, but I didn't know any better. Unusual again. I guess I had like a strong feeling towards Judaism. And so I kept a quasi-kosher home. My kids did not go to any Jewish day school. They had no formal Jewish education. I have 2 boys who, when they clearly had a bar mitzvah, and they learned for that. But that was about it. We bounced around to basically every kind of synagogue in Montreal. So I was for a while a Reconstructionist, and then I was at an Orthodox shul, and then I was at a conservative shul. For quite a few years, we lived in the town of Mount Royal, and we went to the Bethel, where there was 1,500 people, if you can imagine that, which you probably can't, or maybe you can. And so there was no spirituality there. It was, and we weren't paying a lot of money for the seats. I wasn't going to sit way up front. So we sat in the back, and basically, like, we didn't pray. We didn't, first of all, well, we didn't do that. All we did was basically watch people come in and out and decide who had the best and worst outfits. My kids, when my children were teenagers, especially my son, my middle son, he was 15 at the time. He decided that he was not going to go to synagogue with us on Yom Kippur. And I couldn't fathom it. It's Yom Kippur. Like, everybody, I didn't even really fast. Like, I fasted till I had to prepare the food for everybody coming to my house after the fast. And that was the end of the fast. But given that, it was still Yom Kippur. It's like, whoa, it's the holiest day of the year. My son doesn't want to go to this synagogue with 1,500 people. We had a gigantic fight, and he won the battle, and probably at that time the war as well, because he went with us to synagogue. He went in the front door, sat down in his seat, and got up and walked out the back door. So he kind of went to show, and it was a terrible time, because I just couldn't figure out. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what it was. My daughter was 17 and my younger son was 13. That November, my husband's partner had been going to a small synagogue in a shopping mall in Decarie Square called the Torah Center. It was a Chabad house. So this was 1993. In 1993, to have a synagogue in a shopping mall was, to say the least, bizarre. A synagogue you need to have a building, and it has to be schmancy, and I couldn't fathom where the guy was going. And we worked in the garment industry at the time, and I worked with the two of them, and I was furious, and my husband was furious, because his partner had stopped coming to work on Saturday. And in the garment business, Saturday was a big day. Like, you went to work on Saturday. This guy stopped coming to work on Saturday. In the end, the two of them stopped talking to each other and talked through me, and kept, go tell him. And I said, this is ridiculous. I'm not dealing with this. And so I made an appointment to go to this weird place in the mall. And there were two rabbis at the time. One was about 23 or 24, and one was 10 years older. And I decided I'm going to go to see the 24-year-old, because I was 40 years old, and I'm going to kill the guy, because, like, what is this? This is supposed to be Judaism. And he's, his friendship is breaking up. His wife was like, he wasn't going out on Saturday night in June. Shabbos ends at 10 o'clock. Her whole social life was ending. I'm thinking, what is this? So I went in with my stirrup pants, because at the time that's what we wore, stirrup pants, with shirts with like these massive shoulder pads. And I went in ready to absolutely kill the rabbi. I was so angry. And he let me talk for a very long time and didn't say anything. And then finally, I started to talk about what happened with my son, because clearly it was bothering me. And I had never spoken to anyone about it, but this guy, he just all the steam went out of me, and I guess he was easy to talk to. So I told him what happened. And the only thing he said to me was, this was on a Tuesday that I went. He said, come to shul on Shabbos and see what your friend found. So I said, okay. My kids were older. They didn't need me to babysit. My husband was working. I literally dug out my one and only skirt from my closet, because I knew I had to wear a skirt. The mechitza did not bother me at all, which to this day, I don't know why it didn't bother me. So I went to this place, and I very cautiously walked in. I could not read Hebrew. I personally had no Jewish education. I think I went for maybe a few months to learn with a rabbi on Decarie. He was a travel agent, and I think I learned Aleph Beis, but that's about all I knew. I knew which way to hold the siddur, but to say I could follow anything, couldn't follow anything. And yet, I sat there for 2 hours almost crying. I sat in the back and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. There was nobody singing for anybody, and there was no one praying for anybody. Everyone was, I guess, talking. I guess now I'm looking back, talking, having a conversation with God. They were actually praying. And the melodies were something that I had never heard in my life. Chabad is, I guess, famous for their, I guess, every sect, every form of Judaism has, every place has the songs and the melodies that are familiar and moving. And I guess I just couldn't believe what I had found. And I frankly didn't know where to put it. So as soon as the service ended, it was brand new there. So there was about 5 women. I ran out like for my life. And the rabbi chased me down the hallway and told me to stay for the Kiddush, and I just ran away. But believe it or not, I went back the next Saturday. And I kept going back for 3 months until my kids finally figured out that their mother is not home every Saturday morning, and where is she? And very quickly, I realized that I found something. I didn't quite know what it was. And I wasn't ready to keep Shabbos by any stretch of the imagination, but it didn't take me long to stop driving. And I stopped taking my kids to the mall and to movies on Saturday. And it started infringing on their lives, but that was the way it was. My husband grew up in an Orthodox home, but it was his parents' form of Orthodoxy. He had a formal education. He knew how to daven. He knew how to read. He was much further ahead than I was. But he was upset. He found out that I was going to this place, and he wasn't that happy that I was going, because I kind of sided with his partner, and like, what kind of a place is this in a mall? And he just, like, it was a very confusing time. 2 things I did, which many men don't do when they encounter new things. The main thing I did was I befriended, I allowed the rabbi to guide me. When I realized what was happening, and I realized that I don't live on an island, and I have 3 children and a husband and parents and a brother and a big family that I love, I didn't know what to do. So every step of the way that I took, I asked the rabbi, is this the time to do this step? Like, can I do this? Can I do this? And an interesting story is that about 2 years in, maybe, or a year and a half in, I wanted to kosher my kitchen. I had kind of 2 sets of dishes, but not 1 dishwasher. My kitchen wasn't kosher. So I'll never forget, I took my son, who was 14 at the time, proudly into the rabbi's study, and I said, I want to kosher my kitchen. And he told me, come back in 3 months. And I said, okay. I thought he was a bit weird, but okay. And that was July. I came back in 3 months. He said, come back in 3 months. This went on until February, when he finally told me to practice keeping kosher, which I did. I bought, I looked at the labels, and I put 2 sets of different color paper plates, and I did what I had to do. It was almost a year later that he koshered my kitchen. And it was a big job. I mean, it cost a lot of money. I don't know if anyone ever koshered a kitchen. I don't have to tell you. Plus, I added a whole section to my kitchen because I was able to. So my kitchen has a divider, kind of. My kitchen table divides my meat and milk side. I kind of like have a mechitza. But I had to bring water from the one side to the other. It was a big, expensive job. And after many years, the rabbi told me that the reason he didn't let me kosher my kitchen was because he was watching my children. And they were not ready for this to happen. And they would have absolutely destroyed it. So he watched, and at the right time, I koshered my kitchen. And one of the things I did after I koshered it is I put a garbage can, like a small one, in my vestibule. And I told my kids when they came in, because I wasn't forcing anything on them. This I did forced. I was cooking. I was doing all the cooking. So what's the force? I just said, if you come into the house and you have something that's not kosher, just please throw it in the garbage. Just please don't bring it in. And years later, I found out that my younger son was giving away, like he would buy a chocolate bar or gum or I don't know what, and he would give it to his friends. I can't bring this home. I don't have a lot of time to talk, and this is a very long story. I'll just tell you that of my three kids, two are Lubavitchers, married and living in Montreal. And my younger son, the only thing, he didn't buy into this, believe it or not. As the youngest one, you would think that the youngest one would be more malleable, but he just didn't buy into it. He was indifferent. And my older son, my middle son, gave me a run for my money. He was angry and didn't like change and was afraid. I mean, teenagers like things to be the same. The change in their lives is nothing that they like. And I guess he was afraid that his mother was going to change. And I did change, but I changed to be a better mother, not a worse mother. I changed because I used to think, I mean, before I was from, that I controlled the world. I controlled everything everything around me was in my control. And one of the things that I very quickly realized, that there is a God in the world, and ultimately he is the one in control. And when you let go, you just let go of the pressure and the tension and everything else that comes with that feeling that you are in control. And so my youngest son, the only thing I asked of him was that he marry a Jewish girl. And I say that because I'm just going to say one other thing, which I didn't ask Rabbi Pinto if I could say, but I'm going to say it anyway, because it's really the essence of why I became observant. At the time that my son gave me wouldn't come to shul with us on Yom Kippur, he was going to, I won't name the school, but like a private school in Montreal, very, very liberal school, excellent education, but extremely liberal. And I realized, because all this was happening, like the Yom Kippur thing and the synagogue thing, and I realized that if he didn't want to come to shul with me on Yom Kippur, why would he care to marry a Jewish girl? Like, it meant nothing to him. And I knew that I wanted Jewish grandchildren. Didn't matter that I wasn't observant. I guess it was part of my upbringing. I don't know. I just knew that I wanted my grandchildren to be Jewish. And I realized very quickly that the only person that was going to be able to make that happen was me, the mother. Not the rabbi, not a school, not a mentor, not a psychiatrist, nobody. That had to happen and had to come to fruition through me, which leads me to women in Judaism. I'm not a feminist. I'm not, by any stretch of the imagination. A lot of people, when I became observant, I just kept hearing, it's so, Judaism is so patriarchal, and you have to sit behind a mechitza, and how could you do this? And you can't wear pants, and there's so many things you can't do. And one of the answers that I gave was, when I went to the conservative synagogue, I would say afterwards, well, if the only time that you can connect to your husband is the 3 hours that you're in synagogue, then you have a problem with your marriage. The 3 hours that you're in synagogue is when you're talking to God. Actually, you could talk to God anywhere, which I subsequently learned. But I don't need to be beside my husband in synagogue. I need to be in shul. I need to be with a sitter and praying and listening to the Torah reading, and so does my husband. And so I am not sitting behind anything. I'm very happy for the non-distraction. That's all I'm going to say about that. The role, if women knew the power that they wield, I think that many of us would run for the hills, because although men were given many things when God gave the Torah, it looks like, you have, it just daven together. You have to have a minyan, and everything is external with men. Everything is They have to put tefillin and they get called up, and I don't get called up for an aliyah, and I don't do this. That's what a lot of women were telling me. You can't do this. I don't need to do that. I need to do a much more important job than my husband could ever do. First of all, I'm the one that determines if the child is Jewish. Let's start with that. God made sure that men, were given the tribal lineation, Yisrael, Levi, and Kohen. But if the kid's not Jewish, then it doesn't matter. And the mother is the one that determines that. So we could start with that. And I just want to, I know that there's going to be a few questions, but I just want to go to right where we are now. I listened to a fantastic class about this time that we're living in now. And it just, the teacher said something so profound, I was blown away, that because we cannot go to synagogue now, Judaism has been transferred to our homes. And the home has become exactly what God wanted it to be. It's a place where he feels comfortable. We don't need to go to synagogue to pray. Everything is done in the house. And the person that runs the house is the Jewish woman. And when God gave the Torah, I mean, when he gave it, he asked the women very gently, will you accept the Torah? When he asked the men, it was much more harsh. He was much like sterner with them because he knew, I guess, that they needed they needed to be, I don't know, talked to in a different way. So all that we have left now, after all this whole being confined and is what's in our house. That's what we have and what we do in our house. And Judaism, therefore, is predicated on the Jewish home. It's just absolutely incredible. And I just want to, I mean, I see this, there's a lot of men here, but I see that there's also a lot of women. And I just want you to know that it doesn't matter if you're married or you're not married, or if you have children or you don't have children. Jewish women have an influence on whatever sphere that God put us in. We're supposed to be where we're supposed to be, and our lives are supposed to be the way they are. So if you have children and grandchildren, then that's the way it was supposed to be. And I want to say something about that as well, that after your kids grow up, and your kids move out, your grandchildren are watching you. And so I'm not loosening up because my kids moved out of the house. I'm doing things the way I did them when my kids were home, because we are role models for our families. I also want to say that the smell in our houses and the cooking and I know in the Spanish, like you have a really wonderful congregation there. And you like many of, I guess, like all of us, all of our holidays revolve around food. And that's what our kids and our grandchildren and friends and people, they remember walking into your house, and they will remember the smell. It's so comforting. I wrote a cookbook. It's called The Big Jewish Mama's Cookbook. I have to plug it because I wrote it. I'm a writer, so it's a lot easier to write than to publicize and go out on social media. I'm not good at that. I'm okay to write. And one of the reasons I wrote the cookbook, it's basic recipes, it's nothing fancy, is because people forget to stop and just sit down and talk around a table and around good food. Comforting, food is comforting. And it's us, the women. I mean, of course there's men that cook, but it's different when a woman cooks. I don't know. I just think it is. My husband doesn't cook. So for me, it's, that's the way it is. But people, that's what people tell me when they come into my house. It's one of the reasons I wrote the cookbook. Give me the recipe. It smells so good. So I did it. I actually bit the bullet and I did it. Do you have any questions?
5. Okay, one question, and then we'll just take a very short break. One question from Sandra.
Yes, Joannie, I really enjoyed your talk. There's nothing to say. What you say is something we all know, but you just brought it out and you gave a personal testimony to it. And it was very beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much, Joannie. I must say, we hadn't met, and Rabbi Pinto recommended that you should speak in our session. And I'd like to congratulate Rabbi Pinto. He made a really good choice. And,
I'm just telling you that I distilled how many, like 28 years or 26 years in like, I don't know, 20 minutes.
very good. Okay, so we'll just take a very quick break, about 4 minutes, and then we'll welcome Professor Goldstein.
Okay, thank you for having me.